Welcome, everyone, to the Natural State Wellness Academy. This is our seminar on sleep. Hopefully, I can give you guys some tips on how to prevent chronic disease, how to manage your weight, how to manage your stress, um, all these related to our sleep. Even the CDC, before the pandemic, they put this out and talked about chronic diseases and how they are affected by sleep: diabetes, cardiovascular disease, obesity, even anxiety and depression. We're going to talk a lot about that here tonight. So, just an interesting correlation when you look at diagnosed diabetes and the rate at which that's going on in the United States. If you look at diabetes, you look at obesity, you look at mental illness, and now finally, you look at people who sleep shorter than 7 hours a night. Just an interesting correlation. Not going to say that there's any hard and fast data on this, but it's interesting. The people who are the sickest and overweight and also mentally disturbed are also sleeping the least amount. So, just an interesting correlation there. The United States really isn't talking about this problem that we have with sleep and the correlation between metabolic syndrome, but other countries are. And it's interesting. We're going to watch a short video here and see what are other countries saying about this correlation between metabolic disease and sleep.
Australia is in the grips of a sleep health crisis, with our lack of quality shut-eye now being blamed for some of our most serious health problems, including an explosion in rates of diabetes, heart disease and other chronic illnesses.
And now a leading Melbourne researcher is pleading with the government to step in.
Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream.
We all want more of it, but in a world of hectic schedules, around-the-clock work and screen addiction, getting the right amount of sleep is proving elusive for millions of Aussies. Professor Paul Zimmet is one of the country's leading diabetes researchers.
Fabulous paper you just published.
He's recently published a paper revealing how a lack of sleep is fueling a nationwide health crisis. He found obesity, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, stroke, and even some cancer and arthritis can now be linked back to disruption to our body clocks. It's a condition known as circadian syndrome.
All of these have a relationship to our body clock, our circadian rhythm. I think it's a very common thing, poor sleep, and it's very important the community start to understand some of the factors driving poor sleep.
John Newbold is one of more than 10 million Aussies who battle to get a good night's sleep.
And I'll sleep through till 8:30, so I'm getting plenty of sleep, but it's that quality of sleep is perhaps the issue for me.
The 6-time Sydney to Hobart skipper struggles with sleep apnea and chronic snoring each night. 7 years ago, he was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and, along with Professor Zimmet, believes his sleep troubles could be to blame.
I notice it myself sometimes where I'll sort of wake with a start, and it's particularly when I'm sailing on the boat that I do get that particularly, because there's no one to wake me up and I wake myself up with it.
A government investigation into Australia's shambolic sleep patterns raised alarm bells that there wasn't any policy or community awareness programs on sleep health. Experts like Professor Zimmet are now demanding the government intervene with a public health campaign.
It just fascinates me that in terms of public education campaigns about healthy lifestyle, that we're not talking about and how we're bashing, actually, our body clocks.
Shift work and overtime is ruining our body clocks, while screen addiction is still seen as one of the biggest barriers to good sleep. Children are particularly at risk on this front. Experts say tablets and phones should be restricted in the 2 hours before bed to limit blue light exposure. But, as John knows, it's not always that easy.
I used to read a lot and that would put you to sleep, but now Netflix doesn't, and I watch Netflix in bed, so that doesn't help.
To improve your sleep, Professor Zimmet recommends a good diet and exercise to boost melatonin levels. Routine is also king. Pick up a book and put down the tablet. It could save your health in the long run.
Good advice there.
Oh, it is. Thank you, Dr. Kosh.
So very interesting. You know, the United States will give us recommendations on the My Plate program and our nutrition guidelines. They'll tell us what pharmaceuticals we should be taking. Right now, they're telling us we should take the vaccine for COVID-19. But no one is talking about sleep health and how important that should be to the American public. So why are we sleeping less than any other time in human history? Well, we kind of saw some of those points in the video. We have more stimulation than any other time in human history. We eat more processed food and sugar than any other time in human history. We drink more caffeine than any other time in human history. And let's face it, despite the pandemic, I mean, that's added, but we have more stress than any other time in human history. So what are these mechanisms and how are they actually affecting the body? Well, here's some common sleep problems that people may run into. Trouble falling asleep. This could be too much stimulation. It could be too much blue light exposure. It could be too much caffeine. And one thing in particular, it could be a nutrient deficiency or low neurotransmitters. And we're going to kind of talk about each one of these things. But one thing I commonly see, especially within people I love, family members, is they wake up with caffeine. They have to wake up with their caffeine and they go to bed with alcohol. So they basically are medicating themselves to do what their body's naturally rhythms are supposed to do. I want to be up in the morning, so I'm going to artificially stimulate myself with caffeine to do that. And 1 cup of coffee, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the triple grande from Starbucks, like 4 cups of coffee in one drink, or we're talking about drinking a pot of coffee every morning to get up and keep going. And then in alcohol, we're not talking about a glass of wine once a week here. We're talking about a glass or 2 every night. That becomes a common habit. And what starts happening is we're basically medicating ourselves with these substances, and then our body doesn't know how to create its normal diurnal rhythms that it's supposed to go through. The other thing is a nutrient deficiency can also lead to low neurotransmitter production. So we're going to talk about low neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine and how they also cause not just insomnia or sleeplessness, but they also cause depression and anxiety. And it can all go back to a nutrient deficiency. Stress degrades the gut. The gut being degraded does not absorb nutrients as well. Therefore, we're left nutrient deficient and we don't have the building blocks for what we need to make our neurotransmitters. Trouble staying asleep. So this is actually more common in blood sugar problems, which is one of them is called the dawn phenomenon. And this is basically cortisol and melatonin have to be in an inverse ratio, which means that when cortisol is high, melatonin is low. And when melatonin is high, cortisol is low. And we go through this nice rhythm every day in our circadian rhythm. So also cortisol dysfunction can lead to these same type of problems. So excess stress, right? Cortisol is a stress hormone produced in the adrenal glands. Chronic stress leads to adrenal fatigue. So if cortisol is produced in the adrenal glands and you have adrenal fatigue, then your adrenals cannot pump out the adrenaline, norepinephrine, epinephrine, and cortisol that you need to. And that can lead to a circadian rhythm imbalance. And I know this is like super like, whoa, he's moving fast and he's way off in the weeds already, but I promise when we go through these slides, you're going to really see how this ties together a lot better. Another one that's really common in women, both pre and post-menopausal, is low progesterone. Progesterone is a woman's feel-good hormone, and it also is what relaxes a woman. So if you have pre or post-menopausal, doesn't really matter. Women, the higher your stress, the lower the other hormones that you can make, because you're making a lot of other hormones like cortisol, norepinephrine, epinephrine, these other hormones, leaves you less of a building block to make progesterone. So this is really common, something I see all the time whenever I'm coaching, is a low progesterone will have insomnia, you'll have bloating, water retention. You will have, and that's in a premenopausal woman, breast tenderness, like chin line acne around your period, things like that. In postmenopausal women, you don't see all those other symptoms. You mainly just see irritability, low sex drive, and the insomnia. So that's low progesterone. You can get a simple wild yam progesterone cream, and it will help so much to relax you. And guys, you can actually take progesterone too. We make certain amounts of progesterone, and guess what it does for us? It relaxes us the same way. And it's made from wild yams. We're not talking about a bioidentical synthetic laboratory hormone. We're talking about something that comes from God's creation, or from nature. So then finally, sleep apnea, food allergies is a huge one. Systemic inflammation, hormone problems is another one, and infections. These are all four things that I see with people that are struggling with sleep apnea, and they're on a CPAP machine. A lot of times there is a fire somewhere that is causing the inflammation. And when I say infection, it could be viral, it could be parasitic, it could be bacterial, it could be hepatic or liver related. It's like any of those things could be causing someone's sleep apnea. And we all have, probably sitting here, know somebody that is on a CPAP machine. And so think about that for a second. And if you have questions on any of this stuff that I'm talking about, grab a pen and paper, write it down. We'll have like 15, 20 minutes at the end to go over some questions. All right, so let's dig into this a little bit. The effects of cortisol. So I don't go way over your head into all the complex science of cortisol. Just know that cortisol it's actually a good thing. People demonize cortisol like it's so bad, it's this stress hormone, but we actually have to have it to get out of bed. And every morning, our cortisol rises naturally. So if you get up with the sun, or you get up on your own, you don't need an alarm clock. That is because your cortisol has rose and it's gotten you up. In tandem, we're going to look at here in a second what melatonin does, but excess cortisol could be mental or emotional stress. It could be physical stress, like an infection or a trauma or adrenal problems, or postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, mold exposure, chronic viruses, parasites. Parasites is actually one interesting one. So 100 years ago, we used to deworm our animals and deworm our livestock. We used to deworm our families. We do not do that anymore. And so in my gut health seminar, we talk a little bit about parasites, but know that one of the symptoms, actually two of the symptoms for parasites, is one of them is teeth grinding. So if you know anybody who grinds their teeth in their sleep, that's a huge red flag for parasites. Another one is insomnia. So especially if you notice that your insomnia correlates with the moon, and that's super trippy. I don't even know how that's connected, but parasites are more active when the moon is in its full phase. Lo and behold, some people that have parasites have insomnia type reactions. It's really weird though. So anyways, melatonin, actually, did you know this? Melatonin, someone can be having a panic attack, and you can give them melatonin to snap them out of a panic attack. Why? Because it is the direct opposite of cortisol. And during a panic attack, cortisol is spiking really, really high, and that's what's causing this panic attack onset. So we need to know about these two things, because they are in opposite to each other. And when one is high, the other is low. So this is a natural circadian rhythm, a 1-to-1 ratio of cortisol to melatonin. As the light rises, that signals cortisol to rise. And as the day goes on and light diminishes, then we see this onset in the red line of melatonin starting to rise. So this is that natural ebb and flow rhythm of cortisol and melatonin. It ebbs and flows very naturally every day. This is what gets us up in the morning and what lays us down at night. Now, this is what happens when it gets out of balance. So if you disregard the first lines and just look at the second, that yellow line, when cortisol gets too high stress related situations, then it takes longer to come down, which means that melatonin gets a late start in the night and it never gets risen as high as the original red line. And so it's stuck down here. So this is a 2-to-1 ratio of cortisol to melatonin. And then we start really having problems. This is dysfunction of the circadian rhythm. Now, how is this process we just looked at, how is that happening in the light-dark cycle? Well, it's all triggered by light. Light actually comes in through the eyes, and believe it or not, we even have light receptors in the melanin of our skin. So you can actually pick up light, believe it or not, through your skin. It just doesn't have to have a mask over your eyes or something like that. So light enters the eye through the retina. The cells in the retina send signals to the optic nerve in the brain. The brain sends signals to the pineal gland and the I can never say that word, epithalamus. And when darkness is detected, the pineal gland produces melatonin. This is all based off of how light enters our eyes, and it tells our brain to tell our pineal gland what time of the day it is to release the corresponding hormones that dictate what time of the day it is. Now, what's really interesting, early morning sun exposure coming in through your eyes is a great way to signal your brain to start the circadian clock. Now, we know from 12 and a half hours or 13 hours from right now, we're going to need melatonin. So one of the problems with a modern lifestyle is we don't wake up with the sun and go to bed with the sun. One of the best things for your circadian rhythm is to go camping. It regulates your circadian rhythm like nobody's business. And you see people that normally go to bed at 11 or 12, by 8 o'clock, they're like headed to their tent, like, I'll see you guys later, because they are starting to get tired. And that's because you are getting your body back in rhythm with the sun, something we are naturally supposed to be in rhythm with. Now, to further prove this, this is a journal of psychiatry and neuroscience, and they looked at this study and they said that in humans, there is a direct interaction between bright light and serotonin. The mood-lowering effect of acute tryptophan depletion is actually completely blocked out in the study, and they use a 3,000 lux light to prove this. Now, what's interesting is this bottom statement here. Relatively few generations ago, most of the world population was involved in agriculture and was outdoors for much of the day. This would have resulted in high levels of bright light exposure, even in winter. Even on a cloudy day, the light outside could be greater than 1,000 lux, a level normally never achieved indoors. So our indoor environments is part of the problem. As much as we can expose ourselves to the outdoor light, this light that we cannot even achieve in a level indoors, the better it is for our, not only our circadian rhythm, but it said there, our serotonin system. So why are we talking about serotonin, which is our feel-good, mood regulating hormone in regards to sleep? Well, what's really, really interesting is the human body creates serotonin out of the amino acid tryptophan. And so if you see this cycle on the left here, tryptophan is converted into 5-hydroxytryptophan or 5-HTP. And its next step creates serotonin. Serotonin, at the end of the day, is not wasted. We have a very intelligent designer who made us to have serotonin convert into melatonin. So this is exactly why if you go to the lake, you go to the creek, you go to the beach, you spend all day out in the sunshine, your mood is great, you feel like $1 million, you had an awesome time, and then how do you sleep that night? You sleep really, really good. And that is because excess serotonin production from that light, and we're going to look at proof of that sunlight stimulates serotonin. So we're going to look at proof of that. But then we sleep really, really good. And that's, I mean, it's like when you start to see this, it's like a no-brainer that, wow, like this makes total sense. We're supposed to get lots of outdoor light. Even on a cloudy day like today, you can go outside and you can still get 1 to 3,000 lux of light from the sun, even though the clouds are blocking that. You're upwards to 5,000 plus lux of light when it's on a sunny day. So now we go back to, before I jump ahead, let's think about tryptophan for a second. The amino acid tryptophan. So we absorb our amino acids through digestion, right? Well, what happens if we have a digestion problem? Well, then we don't have the building blocks to make the things we need, like serotonin or dopamine, or any of these neurotransmitters that are so validly important. So a healthy, balanced gut actually leads to better sleep. So this is what I really want to highlight, is that this is actually a study in the frontiers of psychiatry. And this is what they found. It said microbial metabolism produces a variety of neurotransmitters. So our microbes in our gut, they provide or produce these neurotransmitters, 5-HT, which is that 5-hydroxytryptophan, dopamine, GABA, short-chain fatty acids, melatonin, and other compounds. Those metabolites not only act directly on the nervous system, but also on the vagus nerve and the effect of the activity of the central nervous system by regulating enteroendocrine cells, which is our hormonal cells. Now, what's interesting is it says, for example, 90% of the serotonin that's in the human body is derived from the gastrointestinal tract. And we have to have certain bacteria that are spore-forming bacteria and able to modulate the synthesis and secretion of 5-hydroxytryptophan by acting on these cells. Now, it shows some of the species of bacteria here, but it also says that at the very bottom sentence, it's well known that 5-hydroxytryptophan is related both to the occurrence of REM sleep and the development of depression, because people that have depression normally always have poor rapid eye movement sleep. That's what REM sleep is. REM sleep is rapid eye movement sleep. And this is a cycle of sleep that we go into that heals our brain. So what's interesting about that is our gut produces 90% of our serotonin, and that serotonin is not wasted. It turns into melatonin. So almost, let's say 7 out of 10 times, people with insomnia, people with depression, they have a root cause of a gut dysfunction. And then you notice I said 7 out of 10 times because there are cases where this is not the underlying issue. So I just want to make that clear. But basically, here's another out of that same study, The Frontiers of Psychiatry. In summary, there is a bidirectional connection between the gut microbiome and sleep and depression. Inflammation and endocrine hormones play important roles in this process. So then it talks about the disturbance of circadian rhythms, sleep loss, and depression have an impact on the metabolism, the indigenous gut bacteria, and the trigger changes in their composition, typically reducing the total number of organisms in these certain species of bacteria. So then it talks about down, if you look down where the middle of the page right here at 53 cited, it said breakdown of the epithelial barrier can cause bacteria and their harmful metabolites to enter into the lymph tissue, stimulate inflammatory immune reactions, and excite the vagus nerve. So what is that saying? Well, that basically is saying that this leads to leaky gut. The breakdown of the epithelial barrier is basically the breakdown of the GI tract. So A, we don't have the right bacteria. B, we're breaking down the gut lining. This is leading to some serious problems with the way that we function. So I know I went a little bit in the weeds right there. And this is considered by a lot of people to be like really like woo-woo, right? Well, you can find studies all day long on this. And I found John Hopkins, really mainstream medical establishment, they even had this quote that said the new findings may explain why a higher than normal percentage of people with IBS and functional bowel problems develop depression and anxiety. And that says that's important because up to 30 to 40% of the population has functional bowel problems at some point. And right now we're seeing higher levels of anxiety and depression than we ever have, ever, in our children, in adults, in everyone. The rates of it are higher than ever, despite this pandemic and the other things that are happening. Here's another, the Clinics in Practice Journal is a 2017 study. They said this review demonstrates the importance of a healthy microbiome, particularly the gut microbiota, for patients suffering with anxiety, depression, dysbiosis, and inflammation. Been all linked to potential causes of mental illness. What about manna? Everybody knows what manna is, right? Everybody's going to get their COVID tests and COVID shots. And manna, they had this to say on their website. The inflammation of digestive organs might show up in some people with depression. Inflammation is associated with other kinds of disorders, heart disease, leaky gut. Researchers suggest that digestion depression connection could be a vicious circle. So even mainstream medicine is agreeing that these two things are directly related. So this is like I'm going to make sure everybody has a copy of this presentation that you guys can look back on. But this is like, balancing cortisol and increasing melatonin. I don't have enough time to go into each one of these things, but, avoid too much alcohol, avoid too much caffeine, avoid super stressful people, avoid chronic cardio, chronic calorie restriction is not a great idea. Bad omega-6 inflammatory oils. Let's stay away from high fructose corn syrup. I mean, kind of like here's some general basis on guidelines. But increasing melatonin production, let's focus on getting more zinc, getting more folate, getting more vegetables, amino acid, tryptophan may be important, early morning sunshine. We're going to talk more about that. But basically those first 4 tips, fix your gut, and then make sure your gut is absorbing these nutrients because those are really important. So I just wanted to highlight that really quick. But we'll get into more of those things as we go through this. So setting up your day for sleep. This is really important. Get out in the sunshine daily as much as you possibly can, but early morning sunshine has really been shown to regulate that circadian clock. So if I get out of balance and I notice that I'm starting to wake up too early or I'm waking up for an hour in the middle of the night, the first thing that I try to do is to get outside first thing in the morning on a sunny morning, and no glasses, no contacts, no nothing. And I don't look directly at the sun because I'm not a bonehead, but I will look in the direction of the light and just observe the morning and let that sunshine get into my eyes and signal those processes in my brain what time it is. And that every time will help regulate my circadian rhythm. And that's exactly what studies are proving when it comes to sunshine. It's super important for that circadian clock. Now, I told you we're going to talk more about this. Basically, this is Environmental Health Preservatives 2008 study, or perspective. I said preservative. The melatonin precursor serotonin is affected by the exposure to daylight. Okay, normally produced during the day, serotonin is only converted to melatonin in darkness. Okay, so we have to have darkness to signal melatonin. Well, I mean, let's just keep it real. Modern lifestyles and modern houses, they all have LED or fluorescent or incandescent bulbs that are going. We have them on all night long. So that is suppressing our melatonin levels to an extent. Remember I said it's not just about like wearing these glasses and protecting our eyes. It's also just our skin has photomodulating receptors in our skin. If you don't believe me, give it a quick Google. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Science has confirmed this. So just dimming our house lights, I'm not going to say turn them off, but dimming our house lights at night will help the onset of melatonin to happen better, right? The more melatonin we have, the better we will sleep, the more we will get through our I call it the cycles of sleep. Like we're gear shifting. Like first gear is deep sleep. That's our anabolic recovery. The deep sleep is for our body. Then we go into light sleep for a few hours, and then we go into REM sleep for an hour or two. And that's usually when we're dreaming. You'll know if you're dreaming because that's rapid eye movement sleep. The more you can remember your dreams, the more that you will know that you're having really crispy, clear, rapid eye movement sleep or REM sleep. The bottom paragraph here, the light we get from being the light we get from being outside on a summer day can be 1,000 times brighter than we've ever likely to experience indoors. So outside during the day is really important, but then darkness at night. So I sorry that I'm like on a soapbox here about that, and I'm just pounding that in, but it's just really important. These are other things that I found to do with sunlight, have nothing to do with sleep. But look at like sunlight has been demonized as like, you know, it's going to give you cancer. Don't get out in the sunlight. If you do, slather these chemicals all over yourself. But look at this. I mean, direct immune suppression when it comes to autoimmunity. So it helps autoimmunity. There's this hormone that protects against skin cancer, they found in basically sun-dependent pathways. It treats skin disorders. I don't know how many of you have like realized when you're growing up or even now as an adult that you're less prone to acne or skin conditions when you've got a tan and you've got out in the sun. Then there's also the feel-good endorphin side that we get from it. And this is really interesting because it actually says that there's blood levels of natural opiates that are called endorphins that we actually produce from sunlight in the melanocytes of the human skin. So no wonder the sunshine makes us feel so good. It's actually giving us little spurts of opiates in our body. That's insane, absolutely insane. So number 2, shoot for your caffeine before noon, and preferably 150 grams or less. Caffeine, let's talk about that for a second. It's just important to note that caffeine has an 8-hour half-life. That means that if I were to have a 150 milligram cup of coffee right now, 8 hours from now, I still have half of that. So I still have 75 milligrams of caffeine in my system. So now think about consuming caffeine at 2 or 3 in the afternoon. At 8 hours later, 10 or 10:30 at night, you still have half of that caffeine in your system that you did at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That's what the half-life of caffeine means. So now think about the people that are walking around drinking energy drinks all day long and what that does to your body's rhythms when it comes to inducing sleep. And do you know caffeine has no calories whatsoever in it? So how does it give you energy? This is what I always like to ask my clients. How do you know how you drink caffeine? Okay, well, how does caffeine give you energy? It has no calories. Well, caffeine stimulates the adrenal glands to release norepinephrine and epinephrine or adrenaline. And that's how we get energy from caffeine. Adrenaline is used to produce energy in a fight or flight situation. That's what adrenaline is actually for. It's for like, you know, lifting a car off of a person who just got into a wreck, or you're running from a tiger. I don't know. But my point is that adrenaline is specifically for that fight or flight situation. And we are chronically stimulating that with caffeine, with energy drinks, coffee, you know, all these things that is prevalent in society. So just a quick rant on that you have to listen to. Consume nutrient-dense foods. This is kind of a no-brainer. Next week, we're going to talk about nutrition. I'll kind of give you guys all my insights when it comes to a nutrient-dense diet. I don't like diets. I like nutrition. So what does that mean? I don't really subscribe to any one particular diet. I just like to eat as much nutrient-dense, real whole food that came from the earth as I possibly can, and in the greatest variety that I can. So if we do that, then we get lots of different micronutrients, right? I don't care about macronutrients as much as I care about micronutrients. And micronutrients are what give us the building blocks that we need to really thrive. So tune in next week for more on the nutrient dense foods topic. We'll talk all about that. And for you guys that saw my first presentation on nutrition, you'll want to show up because I'm going to completely change a lot of things up because I don't want you guys to hear the same information twice. Number 4, avoid regular alcohol. We talked about that. Regular alcohol is diminishing your body's ability to get into a depressive state or a unstimulated state naturally. So we don't want to artificially induce that. Here's a second thing with alcohol, and maybe you guys have experienced this before, but if you go to bed and you've had a few drinks, a lot of times what we find is that you'll wake up midway through the night and you'll have a hypoglycemic response basically, and that wakes you up in the middle of the night. It could be a hot flash, it could be whatever, but that sometimes happens when you drink yourself to sleep. It can cause problems later in the night. And it's not really sleep. That's more like passing out than it is going through those sleep cycles that we talked about that are going through the gear shifts. So stop screen time at least 2 hours before bed. That was what was in our video. You know, blue light blocking glasses. You can get apps for your phone or your computer that dim the blue light. Dim your house lights, you know, as much as you can kind of get yourself darker and darker and darker as you lead up to bed. I have a rule that I practice, which is at 8 p.m., my phone goes on the charger in the drawer. And then I read either a paper copy of whatever I'm reading, or I do stretching and mobility, or I'll listen to something, but I don't like looking at anything unless it's reading a book. Magnesium glycinate or malate. We'll go into this next week, like we already heard in the first nutrition seminar. We are in a chronically magnesium deficient world, and that's because the soil never rests anymore. A lot of the minerals are stripped out of our drinking water due to processing of city water and municipal water sources. So we are left with a lot less magnesium than we are supposed to have. We're supposed to get it from our spring water. We're supposed to get it from natural sodium that we have in salt. We're also supposed to get it from our fruits and vegetables, are a very, very rich source of magnesium. Well, all of our, most, not all, some of us have gardens, but the majority of our vegetables and fruits now are mass processed, and they have a lot less magnesium than they're supposed to have. Magnesium is it's like the most calming mineral. So we need magnesium for over 300 different enzymatic processes. So I'm going to say that a different way. Magnesium is responsible for over 300 things in your body. It's really, really important. So I've found that everyone is deficient in magnesium. In fact, the studies say 80 to 90% of the public are. And so supplementing with magnesium glycinate, magnesium malate, magnesium citrate, and especially before bed, it helps your sleep dramatically. Oh, by the way, magnesium also, it diminishes leg cramps, Charlie horses, toe cramps. And one of the reasons why is because a magnesium deficient muscle will start to spasm and contract because it doesn't have its calming mineral, which is magnesium. So if you're having problems with leg cramps, calf cramps, toe cramps, any of that, the first thing I look at is magnesium deficiency. And just telling you, like, from anecdotal experience, everybody that I put magnesium on is like that wasn't already on it. They're always like, man, I sleep so much better. And I'm like, yeah, I know, because magnesium really calms you down big time. So after magnesium, 400 to 600 milligrams of magnesium, black out your room. No alarm clocks, no cell phones plugged in next to the bed, no fire alarm, green light, whatever you can think of in your room. Get it as dark and black as possible. The only thing that should be shining in your room is the moonlight coming in the window. If you have a street light outside your window, whatever it is, anything can disrupt your body's ability to sense darkness. So I always tell people the first things that got to go out of your bedroom is your cell phone charger, the Wi-Fi router better not be under your bed or something crazy like that. And it may not be a bad idea that I'm going to probably do a class on this later to talk about EMFs and electromagnetic fields and how basically the wire running right behind our bed that goes to an outlet, or the wire that goes mostly ran on both sides of the bed into both outlets that go into the nightstands, that is emitting an electromagnetic field. That field can disrupt your sleep. And every house, what do? They run the wires to both sides of the bed to make sure both nightstands have an outlet. And how high is it? Well, it's about 3 feet high going through the wall. For those of you who know who Chris Kramer is, ask him if you don't believe me. That is basically about 6 to 8 inches from your head. On the other side of that drywall is a Romex cable, and it's buzzing all night long. So important things to look at, man. We build these houses and we just don't look at a lot of these aspects. So that I have found actually to be pretty big with people that struggle. If you have an EMF sensitivity, electromagnetic sensitivity, that can be huge for your sleep. So something to look at. Black out your room though. Black out curtains, blinds, whatever you got to do. Get it as dark as possible. Again, I'm going to say it again. Forgive me. Get your cell phone out of the bedroom and get your charger. Put it on the other side of the house. Put your phone on airplane mode if you're not that important like me. So be aware. Number 8, be aware of the electronics right next to you. I already went into that, so we don't need to touch on that twice. Now, most importantly, the biggest thing, and you notice I put this alarm clock in the picture, but most importantly, you know what science has confirmed the most important aspect of maintaining quality sleep is a consistent bedtime and consistent wake time. So that means that I go to bed 15 to 30 minutes around the same time every night, and I wake up 15 to 30 minutes around the same time every day. And this is why shift workers have such a rough time, especially if they're trying to like be with their family on the weekend, but then they're back to the night shift during the week. It's like havoc on your circadian rhythm because your body's all confused. It doesn't know when to put out the right hormones at the right times. But this is the most important thing out of all the studies, that a consistent bedtime and consistent wake time is the best way to signal your body for proper sleep. And so in all cases, that may be difficult. Everybody's circumstances are different. But here's another thing that was found in the studies: 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. was found to be the most beneficial hours of the entire night's rest. So what we call this like the hours of power. And what that means is for every hour you get from 10 to 2 is worth double in all the rest of the night's hours worth of sleep. So we may have that tendency to like want to stay up a little later, want to finish watching late night with Jimmy Fallon or whatever it is. But just know that these were found in the studies to be the most beneficial. And if you think about it, those of you who have kids or have had kids, you regulated your kids to get to bed at a certain time, right? Well, as adults, we stop regulating ourselves. We stop regulating, oh, I can stay up a little bit longer. Oh, I can sit out here on the couch a little bit longer. We stop regulating ourselves because we're an adult, right? Well, maybe it's time that we, just like we did our children, that we regulate ourselves a little bit and say, no, it's time to go to bed. I'm going to go to bed because I know this is beneficial for me and I want to be sharp tomorrow. I got things that are important to me in my life. I got things that I want to continue doing well into my years. And this is important to me. So I'm going to prioritize my rest and my recovery. And not to mention, anybody sitting here should be scared to death for, and I am included too, of Alzheimer's and dementia. And one of the greatest ways to prevent Alzheimer's and dementia is to get that quality REM sleep, that quality brain recovery sleep that we get in a good night's rest. So as we wrap up here, herbs to improve sleep quality. These are natural compounds found from Mother Earth, nature, God's creation, whatever you want to call it, that stimulate sleep quality. And one of the things, and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to look up a bunch of studies on this because I want to know what each one of these herbs does. And it was very clear, like unequivocally, when you start looking at scientific research, that these compounds, no wonder they've been used for thousands of years in Chinese or Ayurvedic medicine to do what they do, because they work. So here's a study with chamomile tea. They had 77 cases of elderly people in nursing homes that were struggling with sleep problems. The participants were selected through random continuous sampling and divided into intervention and control groups. The intervention group received 400 milligrams of oral capsules of chamomile twice daily after lunch and after dinner for 4 weeks. The control group did not receive the intervention. What did they find? Oral administration of chamomile extract has sedative properties in sleep quality. And basically every other study I looked at said the same thing. This is on valerian and lemon balm. This is specifically on women who are going through menopause and having sleep disturbances. The valerian and lemon balm shined out when it came to creating a better night's sleep. You know, all of these listed on here are great. The top two are my favorite, is the lemon balm tea and the chamomile tea. About 8 o'clock every night, it's something I look forward to. I sip on my tea, and I know that not only does it taste really good, but it's herbal medicine that I can take that will also help in my sleep. You can also take supplements. I recommend not just taking a blanket approach and just like, I'm going to just take a bunch of supplements to make sure that I sleep. That is useful to get someone to relief. But what we want to do is find out, why do you have a deficiency in magnesium? Why do you have a deficiency in 5-hydroxytryptophan? Are you not absorbing your tryptophan? The amino acid L-theanine there in the middle, another amino acid that's very, very good in sleep quality. Remember, our gut bacteria are supposed to produce our GABA and our serotonin, the 5-HTP. Why is that not happening? We want to get to the root cause of that. Or do I have too much stress? Why do I need to take melatonin? These things can help get you to sleep and get you sleeping, but we want to get to the root cause of that and find out, why am I deficient in these things? If you're interested, I have, for anyone that takes part in the seminar, I give 25% off for life, all Thorne products. So just for being a listener or a client of mine, I give you 25% off, not just one time, but for life off the store. Thorne supplements. If you don't know what Thorne is, look them up. The United States Olympic team uses them. The Golden State Warriors. They're one of the highly most respected supplements on the market. They do third-party testing. I mean, they are legit. Be wary of getting your supplements off Amazon nowadays. If you can get them directly from a source, there's lots of scams and things happening on Amazon, and labeling fraud and things like that. So, okay, cool. We are to the end of this thing. Hope you got value out of this tonight. Again, leaving me a review on Google or Facebook or donating will allow me to continue to give this away free of charge week after week. This is a labor of love. You can find out more information on that at musclesandveggies.com/education. You can also get a look at the upcoming classes, like what's next week, what's the week after. Next week, by the way, is Super Bowl. So we're not going to have class Sunday night. We're going to have class Saturday night. So repeat that. Saturday night is the nutrition class. And I also started a Facebook group too. And if you're on Facebook, it's called the Natural State Wellness Academy. That's what I'm going to call this, the Natural State Wellness Academy, because we're in the natural state and we want to get our bodies into the natural state. So that's what I've decided to call this, the Natural State Wellness Academy. You can find that on Facebook. Join the group for updates on what classes we're going to do. You know, we post funny stuff on there, like our meals. Like the group that we started this deal with, we've had so much fun posting our meal ideas and supplements, and oh, we found a good deal on this. It's just been a lot of fun. So that's why I wanted to not end it and keep this thing going. So thank you for my original core group. You guys know who you are. Thank you so much. And yeah, let's open it up to questions. What do you got? question wise on any or all things.